My Lords, I thank the Noble Lord the Minister for introducing this bill and join the widespread tributes to the Noble Lady Baroness Randerson that we heard from the Minister and from around the House. Noble Lords may be little surprised to see me here. Transport is not usually my normal territory, but I can reassure Noble Lords that my noble friend Baroness Jones of Moulscombe is recovering very well from her hip operation. She'll be back on Monday, hopefully, and so I expect that she'll be taking later stages of this bill forward, but in the meantime you get me. Now, the Noble Lord the Minister, in introducing this bill, reflected on the fact that three parties had in their manifestos promises about bus services. Well, I will have to add to that and say the Green Party put bus services absolutely front and centre of its manifesto. And I'll highlight two things that were in that manifesto. One was a focus on village bus services, and it promised a service to every village in the land. And the second thing that was in that manifesto was free bus travel for the under-18s. And I'll point, Noble Lords, to the success of the Scottish Greens, who from their place in government were able to bring in free bus travel for the under-22s in Scotland, which has been seen a real step forward in introducing young people to bus services, building this into an idea as a standard part of their lives, with that free offer, which has been really successful, really useful and really valued. And I think I really want to pick up, quite a number of Noble Lords have said, well, there's the cities and they can do these things, but, you know, we've got to be realistic about what rural areas can do. And I think it's really important not to underrate the capacity of rural bus services and rural institutions to actually oversee those bus services. And to point as a practical example for that, after the shock of the COVID pandemic, the Green-led Herefordshire County Council made all buses free at weekends and put on extra weekend services. They used £1 million from the COVID Recovery Fund to do that. And of course, we are talking about Herefordshire, a very heavily rural town, village kind of area. What happened was there was nearly 170,000 journeys taken on the 12 new Sunday bus services. And after the scheme ended, 5 of the most popular services continued to run 7 days a week. So if you provide the services, you give people a real cost benefit from those services, they will adopt them and make them a regular part of their lives. And that's as true of rural areas as it is of city areas. Now, coming to the broader picture, I suspect this is a figure several people have already quoted before, but it is worth revisiting. 23-24, 3.6 billion passenger journeys. Buses are how people get around. But this is also a figure that's seen a massive decline. The mileage for the year to most recent March was down a quarter since 2010. We've heard a lot of hot air over recent decades about a so-called claim more war on the motorist. What we've actually had instead is a butchering of the buses. And I'm afraid I started with the figure of 2010 because we know where the responsibility for that butchering of the buses lies, the party that was in control at the time. And behind that has also been an ideological position where we've seen bus services, particularly outside London, being one for private profit rather than for public good. This is one more privatisation disaster that has absolutely failed, and to a limited degree at least, this bill is happily finally undoing that loss of local control, that loss of local democracy that was represented by the privatisation. Now, a number of Noble Lords, and I will briefly focus on two, how buses are particularly important to lower income households, to job seekers, to women, to older people. And it's crucial both for public health, and I don't think anyone's used that phrase yet, but we have widely acknowledged a loneliness epidemic. If you want to think about a prescription of taking one way to tackle the loneliness epidemic, then bus services being readily available to people is actually an important part of that measure. And on that point, I want to pick up a particular point with the Noble Lord the Minister. we're coming back to funding, and I understand this may not be central to the bill, but I think it's an important, relatively cheap point to be raised. The statutory concessionary bus fare for free travels for pensioners and disabled runs on weekdays between 9:30 a.m. and 11 p.m. Now, we all know about medical appointments that may well require travel before 9:30 a.m. We know that many older people, particularly, are providing childcare to enable often family members to actually take paid employment. They may well need to travel before 9:30 a.m. Would the Noble Lord the Minister look to making what would be quite a modest investment to ensure that that concessionary free travel is available to everyone, which would surely be of a high level of public benefit? Many people have raised the issue of the rise in fares from £2 to £3. I think it's worth highlighting that the £3 level is currently, under current government arrangements, due to end in December this year now. That doesn't give people a long-term sense of planning. Surely the sensible thing to do would be ideally go back to £2, but at least provide long-term certainty for operators, for local councils, for communities and individual travellers to know that that £3 bus fare at least will stay there. Now, I want to also particularly highlight, I think like many Noble Lords, I received a large number of briefings. I'll particularly highlight one from the Green Alliance and the Campaign for Better Transport and the Urban Transport Group. And the Green position, indeed the position of those briefings, I think set out that this bill is heading in the right direction, but it's not going nearly far or fast enough. And one of the things that's missing is failure to encourage the recovery of lost routes. What we really need local authorities to be able to do is identify where the holes are and fill those holes in, and that is really not the provision here in this bill. There's also, I think absolutely rightly, a call for a bus service guarantee to guarantee all communities have a minimum level of bus service. And that, again, comes back to the village point I started with. Then you would expect me as a Green to focus on the need for a firm date to have zero-emission buses. This is such an obvious step in terms of both public health and also reliability and certainty. With new buses with high levels of reliability is really important, as well as the clean air. And then finally, we've talked quite a bit about bus stops. I'm going to jump on a particular favourite little hobby horse of mine, which is assuming that everyone has a mobile phone that's going to give them reliable information about bus arrivals. It's not true in London. It's not true at the bus stop that I use most mornings. And having signage at bus stops where that's possible, at least proper guidelines of timetables, is something that's absolutely crucial to actually enable people to use buses. I'm just going to make two final points. One, I've got to particularly highlight the situation of South Yorkshire, which has been terribly hit by that butchering of the buses. We've actually seen a bus mileage decline across the region of 42%. The bus services in South Yorkshire have got close to what you'd have to describe as collapse. Now, there is a plan to take franchising forward, but it's going to take a very long time, and this bill will possibly assist. But I'd be interested in anything that the Noble Lord the Minister can say about particularly helping South Yorkshire to put back those really crucial services in an area where people really need them to get to work, to get around. And the final point I want to raise, which I don't think anyone else has specifically, is the issue around that's starting in London, but it should apply around the country, really. There is a campaign, some Noble Lords may know, about a London bus driver Bill of Rights to be included in the TfL framework bus contract. Now, I'm aware this bill does not cover London, but nonetheless, the issues this campaign raises apply for bus drivers around the country. And I think it was the Noble Lord, Lord Whitty, made the point about the fact that we have the bus drivers are an ageing group of people, and we need to make sure that this is a career that appeals to people coming into the future. And I note that, Noble Lords, to give you advance notice, that on the 29th of January, there's actually going to be a march starting from Victoria Station, where a year ago a pedestrian was killed by a Route 13 RATP bus operating under contract for TfL. And there have been at least 87 other victims killed in preventable bus safety accidents in London since 2016. And this, of course, is of great concern to the drivers and the conditions of the contract that they feel are dangerous. And I note that the drivers will be marching to Parliament Square, so look out for them on the 29th of January. And this bill doesn't have any of the data transparency or safety reporting requirements that the House of Lords itself tried to be incorporated in the 2017 Bus Services Act. So I can say to noble lords that my noble friend very likely will be the person particularly bringing that issue at further stages of this bill.